Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 345 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin, Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by, as always, my co-host, Adnan Ikic, and a very special guest, friend of the show, Aaron Freeman, at Locked On Falcons. And we are going to be breaking down the Falcons injury report, talking about the new kicking competition, and talking about how the Falcons can bounce back against the Vikings on Sunday Night Football. Will they bounce back? That's probably the bigger question. But can they? Absolutely. We're going to talk about pathways for them to get it done and how this team can steal a win on the road here. But once again, thank you guys for tuning into the Falcoholic Live, presented by FanDuel. We will be getting right to that. Before we do that, I want to check in. Adnan, how are we doing tonight?
Doing well. Better than I was on Sunday for sure, but probably worse than I will be this coming Sunday if the team doesn't get it done. But yeah, I mean, right now, look, we're not panicking. We're 0-1 right now, but lose a couple more games and that panic button may be getting pressed sooner rather than later. But for now, we're fine.
Yeah. It's too early to hit the panic button, but given this brutal stretch, it may not be too long before we're hitting it. But Aaron, I know we talked about this before the show. I was planning to have Aaron on in a couple weeks, maybe after the Panthers game, get Aaron in here on a win. Had a cancellation. Aaron steps in as he's very great about doing, and he's here after another loss. So sorry we couldn't break the trend, Aaron. But otherwise, how you doing tonight?
Kevin, I'm so disappointed to be on a show where I get to complain about the Atlanta Falcons, which I've been doing for the better part of 2 decades. Complaining about the Atlanta Falcons is my favorite pastime. So I'm happy that you actually brought me in after a loss, because having to come on this show and say positive things about the Atlanta Falcons for an hour, like I don't want any part of that. So I appreciate you having me on tonight. And so I'm in a great mood. I get to do the thing that I do so often, which is complain about the Atlanta Falcons for the next hour. So I'm feeling great.
Yeah. It'd be weirder if it was after a win, because then you'd be like, I don't know. I had this whole list of things written down that I was gonna hate on. This. I hate that. I hate that. I hate that. And it's like, maybe there was a few things you could still hate on if they won, but the list isn't as long, usually. So I'm glad the list is plenty long today. But there were some good things last week too. The Michael Penix shout out, and a couple. There's definitely some notable things about the defense and all that. And we'll get to some positivity. Don't worry, guys. We're not in full on burn it all down mode yet, but I'm gonna get to all that tonight. But before we dive in too far to week 2. And that matchup, let's real quick take a look at the injury report today. Couple notable names obviously on there for the Falcons. And that definitely some important names to monitor here. It does look like at this stage that somehow the Vikings are on here, but not the Falcons. Great job, Atlanta. I know you just really gotta hose me. They put out the injury report article and didn't actually update their official one, but I got it here. We found it. All right. So Darnell Mooney and Drake London both limited with shoulder injuries. Obviously not great, but they are practicing at this point. DeMarco Hellams limited with the hamstring, so that's hopeful after he missed all of last week. James Pierce Jr., the rookie pass rusher, limited with a groin. And then we have 3 DNPs, Jamal Agnew with the groin, Jordan Fuller with a knee, Jack Nelson with a calf, and then Casey Washington with a concussion, which is obviously scary for him because he's already had a couple in the NFL. Aaron, it's only Wednesday, but what's your level of concern for these guys? Mainly, the guys that we're thinking about potentially playing. I know the 2 wide receivers are major, and obviously James Pierce led the team in pressures, I believe, with 4. So that could end up being a major loss too if he can't go. But what's your level of concern about this injury report right now?
It's a moderate level of concern. My main concern is the wide receivers. Raheem did say today that he expects Drake London to play, but given Raheem's history with injury reports, you can't always take him at his word in terms of a guy's day to day and then misses a whole month. A guy's week to week and then misses, half the season. And so it's like, I expect him to play. And then, we get to Saturday or Sunday and we find out he's inactive. So my concern is for that right now. If the Falcons are down both Drake London and Darnell Mooney, then it's going to be tough sledding for this offense. I feel like, I think James Pierce had a solid debut. But I feel like the Falcons are deep enough at edge where it's not to say he won't be missed, but like I feel like the drop off between him and Arnold Ebiketie and Jalen Walker and Leonard Floyd is they're all kind of in the same sort of wheelhouse. So, 3 of those guys being available, you should be fine, especially with Christian Darrisaw. I think the expectation is that he'll play on Sunday night, but with some of the concerns that the Vikings have at the offensive tackle position, I think you'll be fine if you're the Falcons without James Pierce, or if he's on a pitch count or something like that.
Yeah. We'll have to see how that plays out. But like you said, that they do have a pretty good rotation right now. Hopefully, that it's more precautionary with Pierce at this stage. He's just limited too, so not an overwhelming level of concern. I agree with your takes there for the most part. Adnan, how are you feeling about the injury report right now going into week 2?
Look, in a vacuum, I'm not concerned too much. The main concern is the fact that there's so many wide receivers that are stacked up on it right now, because I think Casey Washington also didn't practice. He suffered a concussion, which is normally it's rare to come back from a concussion in 7 days, especially if it's not your first one. I think this is Washington's second or third at this point. So I would not count on Casey Washington being out there next week on Sunday. Now, that's not really that concerning as long as Mooney and Drake London are both playing. But if Mooney and London are both out, Casey Washington's out, all of a sudden your depth chart is McLeod, Kaderil Hodge, and David Sills, presumably. And I mean, that's it, because I mean, Agnew also missed practice as well. So the fact that there's so many wide receivers on the depth chart is the most concerning part, but limited practice on Wednesday, that's normally a really good sign. Even if they were to have missed practice on Wednesday, it's not sort of condemning at that point, just because you still have Thursday and Friday. But the fact that they were out there today, I think it makes me feel better than I would have yesterday. So I do think, for what it's worth, that everyone that was limited today is probably going to end up suiting up on Sunday, and I think the team will be fine in that case. And we just have to hope for no injury re-aggravations or anything like that moving forward.
Yeah, that'll be important. Can they get through practice this week? Okay. And, with these shoulder injuries, a lot of times it is pain management, and not to say that that's easy to manage or anything like that, but a guy like Drake London, have to think he's kind of not going to agree to sit out the game. How many snaps he plays, if he'll be limited on a snap count, anything like that. Hard to say. But right now, I would expect, like Raheem Morris said, would expect Drake London to play. Mooney, I think, is a little bit more up in the air. But I think Mooney was very close to coming back for week 1. And they held him out mostly as a precaution. So hopefully that means that he could be ready to go here for week 2. And him starting the week practicing is a good thing to see, too. And then real quick, we'll touch on the Vikings side, which is a lot longer. And by a lot longer, I mean it's over 10 players. So we're going to talk about the DNPs. I think those are the ones to really monitor here. Like Aaron said, Christian Darrisaw was back to full participation today, coming off his knee injury. So the expectation will be that he returns. But 6 players now DNP for the Vikings on Wednesday. And again, we'll have to sort of see how this progresses throughout the week. But linebacker Blake Cashman left the game late with a hamstring and was declared out, so he's definitely someone that could miss time. Vikings return specialist Ty Chandler out with a knee injury. Center Ryan Kelly, one of their big offensive line free agent additions, he was out with a toe injury today. That's a new one. Josh Oliver, the tight end, out with an ankle injury. And then 2 concussions here that showed up. Andrew Van Ginkel, one of the kind of major chess piece pass rushers for the Vikings, out with the concussion. And then cornerback Jeff Okudah, former Falcon, who was starting for the Vikings more or less at corner at this point, also out with a concussion. And as Adnan said, usually the concussions hold guys out for a week. Now, it's not a guarantee, but it's something to monitor. And then Harrison Smith, who missed Monday's game, he was limited with an illness, so it seems like he's also on the path back. Everybody else was full for the most part, so I'm not too don't have a high level of concern about those guys. But quite a list of guys, Adnan, on the injury report for the Vikings, so that could be a significant factor on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is one of those situations where I think the Vikings are at even more of a disadvantage, given that they played the game on Monday Night Football. So they already have a full day and a half less of rest than the Falcons do going into this week, because they were the last game of the week this week. But yeah, I mean, especially the two starters on defense, Andrew Van Ginkel and Blake Cashman. These are two starting linebackers, and it's I feel like it's a big deal. Just the Vikings, like their whole bread and butter on defense last year was they were this incredibly stout run defense. Like I feel like even last season when the Vikings defense was like it was a very good defense, very strong defense, but you could sort of get them through the air. They were like a bottom 5 defense when it comes to yardage through the air in pass defense, but they were the second best run defense in the league. And now the fact that, they're missing multiple players on their linebacking core, if these guys are out, that would be a huge, huge boost to the Falcons, especially given the fact that Falcons couldn't really run the ball at all against Tampa Bay. We talked about it in the post game. There are significant concerns with it going into this game, but if those guys are out, then it sort of opens the door a little bit to be able to do a little bit more, hopefully, with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, and to not be completely, shut down in that facet of the game. Because if they are, then I feel like it'll be incredibly difficult, because you may just be right where Brian Flores wants you to be with the young quarterback.
Yeah, you need the run game for sure in this one. This is one of those matchups where I think it's really critical. But yeah, Aaron, really, really sizable injury list here for the Vikings. Any of those that you're particularly monitoring closely heading into Sunday Night Football?
Yeah, I think Ryan Kelly, the center, Blake Cashman, and Van Ginkel are probably the three that would be the most interesting. Oliver obviously is also another guy because he's their number 2 tight end, and they utilize a lot of 12 personnel 2 tight end sets on Monday night. And Hawkinson's a good tight end, but like he's not the blocker that Oliver is, and so that does change a little bit of the math with how you have to defend him and whatnot. Cashman is a very good blitzer. We didn't get to see Brian Flores go into sicko mode when it came to dialing up pressure on Monday night against Caleb Williams, but we could very easily see him do that this week. That was something that they did quite a bit the last time the Falcons played the Vikings, and now you have Michael Penix instead of Kirk Cousins in that regard. So we'll see. Cashman really gave the Falcons, like, that was the one game that Bijan Robinson struggled in blitz pickup, specifically trying to pick up Blake Cashman a number of times in that game. And then Van Ginkel, his claim to fame is basically, if you throw a screen or a smoke route to his side, he is going to pick it off. He almost had one last year against the Falcons. He almost had one Monday night against the Bears. It's like, if he's out of the lineup, you could just spam screens all day, every day to his side of the field now, because I don't know if Dallas Turner, who presumably will step in to the lineup for him, is going to be quite as good at dealing with that specific aspect. But I'm sure, because he'll feel some type of way about the Falcons passing on him for Michael Penix. He'll go off in that game somehow, some way against Elijah Wilkinson or something like that. But those are the defensive ones that matter a lot. And then with Kelly at the center position, I don't know who the Vikings backup center is, but I'm going to assume that he is not nearly as good as Ryan Kelly is. And that was a big investment that the Vikings had on their offensive line, because for anybody out there, the Vikings offensive line has been a problem spot for that team for it's basically the Falcons pass rush, where it's just like, feels like 15 years of struggles up front, and they really invested resources to solidify that. And if, Kelly's out of the lineup, then it may at least regress a little bit back to what we have known the Vikings interior offensive line, especially, to be over the years. Although I know Donovan Jackson, their first round pick, had a really good night going up against our guy Grady Jarrett on Monday night as well. So they can probably navigate the Ryan Kelly injury probably easier now, given the new guards that they have there. But, if you're getting replacement level performance from whoever his backup is, then that is something that the Falcons could take advantage of.
Yeah, that'll be an important one to watch. The interior in particular, like you said, has been an issue for the Vikings. And after major investments, like a first-round pick and spending money on Will Fries and Ryan Kelly to get that fixed, that would be quite the blow to have Ryan Kelly out in week 2. And a potential opportunity for the Falcons defense, who I think performed better than I was expecting, no doubt about that, against the Bucs. So I'm sure we'll get into that more tonight. But real quick, want to get to Alex Foster's comment with the $5. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate you. It says, waiting all day for Sunday night. I'm not singing it, guys. Not for $5. Yeah. Also, I can't hit those notes. Yeah. I won't even try. But he says, Falcons need to win. I'm not going to rhyme for them. Yep. Respect it. He said they haven't earned the rhyming. Yeah. If they start winning, then we'll start coming up with the Sunday Night Football rhymes. But yeah, this game becomes a lot more important because they lost to the Bucs. I think the Falcons could have gotten the win against the Bucs. They could possibly have been able to more or less come out of this early stretch with the win against the Bucs and the win against the Panthers and feel that they'll be okay. Like, regardless of how these other games go, they'll be okay. Now with the loss against the Bucs, you're on the back foot. So you have to recover somehow. You have to find a win in here in these games where you're going to be an underdog in every game now, except for the Panthers game. And, the Vikings on Sunday Night Football, I don't know if that's your best opportunity to steal that win, but it's the first opportunity. So, we're going to talk about it. And I think it's an important game here. The Vikings are not invincible. I think the Bears are not a very good team, right? I don't think anything that we saw on Monday Night Football made me think that the Bears were very good. And obviously the way they totally blew that game, on top of being very familiar to Falcons fans, it also showcased, I think, that the Vikings are pretty vulnerable. I think the defense, did have some struggles, and the offense was very inconsistent, and J.J. McCarthy, that's not surprising for a guy like J.J. McCarthy in his first start. McCarthy, to his credit, I think, finished really strong and took advantage of a lot of attrition in the Bears defense. The Bears secondary was ravaged, and I was kind of surprised that the Vikings didn't have more success throwing the ball until late in this game. But kudos to him for bouncing back and getting the dub. I don't think this is a pushover team. I've been saying that all offseason. But I don't think they're a 14-win team this year either. I think they're going to take a step back, but I still think they're a 10-win playoff contender. So another tough matchup here in week 2. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit about one of the biggest issues from week 1, which was the kicking game, where we had Younghoe come out, hit his first field goal, felt pretty good about that. Then the second field goal was a doink in from 36 yards. I got pretty worried at that point. And then the 44-yard miss to end the game, which would not have won the game, folks. I know a lot of people are like, oh, he cost them the game. He cost them a chance at overtime, right? Which is not a guaranteed win. Now, at the same time, we should have had overtime. Definitely, 98% of the time should have had overtime there. So he cost them a chance at a win. This is where I would go with that. But Falcons, the fact of the matter is Younghoe's time is up, and I think his time was more or less up last year. But because of his history with this team and the contract, which, probably should have moved on from that, but because of all those things, the Falcons were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and give him an opportunity in camp, which, to be fair, in camp, other than day 1, looked pretty good. I know Adnan, day 1, it looked like Lenny Krieg was going to take over, and then it was Koo the rest of the way. He did have that one miss in the preseason, but nothing from that stretch was overly concerning. But you can see when he gets into the games, there's something mentally going on there, and it's causing great problems. And the Falcons brought in about 6 kickers and tried them all out. Ended up with John Parker Romo, favorite of Evan Birchfield, friend of the show. But yeah, Adnan, where are you at with this kicking competition? Is this you're wanting Romo to take over immediately? Do you want to see how the week goes with practice, or do you think Koo should get another shot on Sunday?
Yeah, no, I think Koo is finished no matter what. Like if it was up to me, I would have much rather gone the route of the 49ers where they just straight up cut Jake Moody like the next day this week and now they're moving on. Here's the reason why. Because let's say that Younghoe Koo wins the competition this week. Let's say he outkicks John Parker Romo and they roll with him again like this coming Sunday. I don't think that changes anything around the situation. Uh, I don't think that changes the fact that Younghoe Koo seems like he may have the yips at this point. That's the baseball term for those who aren't familiar with it. Very, very scary thing for any professional starting pitchers. Um, but also, like, I think Younghoe Koo, like, right now, he is completely in his own head. The change in stance has physically changed his kicking ability. And I mean, we saw it. Like, I've never seen a ball just sort of like hook the way that it did indoors, like that last kick. Like, that just curved straight to the right. Like, seeing it from the alternate camera angle from behind the like field goal, it just looked crazy. But yeah, I feel like Younghoe Koo is so in his own head. He knows that if he misses another kick, if he does get another chance this Sunday, that his job is probably more or less completely finished, and that he's definitely going to get cut after that. And I just don't like going out there with a kicker in that sort of situation, in that scenario, because I just feel like it's going to be a recipe for disaster and that it could ultimately cost the team another week because this is going to be a close game. Like the Falcons and Vikings, I think, are a very even match, just like the Falcons and Buccaneers were. And, you've already sort of lost the opportunity at overtime in week one. You can't afford to have a game where it's so thin within the margins to where you have your field goal kicker missing another field goal or extra point because that could completely be the difference in this game. I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm on record about it. I didn't want to come into this season with Younghoe Koo, and it's sort of all right, better late than never to move on from him. But yeah, I mean, it will be way too late if you continue sticking with them this week. I would much rather just roll with John Parker Romo for this Sunday night.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree there. Aaron, where are you at with this kicking situation?
Let it be settled on the field, on the practice field, and whoever kicks better this week, be the kicker. If that's Younghoe Koo, then it's Younghoe Koo. If it's John Parker Romo, it's John Parker Romo. At this point in time, like, to me, it's just like I get it where like we're gonna sit here and second guess the decision to run it back with Younghoe Koo, given last week's results. But like it's just as possible that he could make his next 16 field goals or miss his next 16 field goals. It's just kind of the nature of the kicking game. So for me, if they want to move on from Younghoe Koo, it'll be the time to do it, right? But if they decide to roll with Younghoe Koo, then they decide to roll with Younghoe Koo. Like I don't feel like, I mean, at this point in time, we brought in, two kickers in Lenny Krieg and now John Parker Romo. And if Koo continues to outshine those guys in direct competition, then he kind of has earned the right to continue to be the kicker. And the Falcons can play this game of like, hey, let's just keep bringing new kickers every single week to add to the practice squad to push Younghoe Koo. And if it leads to him having success, this Sunday, then, hey, maybe it's a working strategy. Maybe having a kicker breathing down his neck will cause him to be an effective kicker. So for me, it's like I don't really have a horse in the race. Just give the job to whoever is the best guy on the field. So far, that has been Younghoe Koo. That hasn't translated, from Monday through Saturday onto Sundays quite yet. It could this upcoming Sunday, but ultimately, it's just like for me, it's like whoever is the better kicker in practice this week should be the kicker. And I don't particularly care who it is. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you just got to get the results, right?
Yeah. We can't have the kicking game be a problem. At this point, we know it's unlikely to be a strength. Not trying to slander John Parker Romo or anything, but unlikely to be a strength. This is probably going to be something the Falcons are going to attack next offseason unless they can find something, or maybe Lenny Krieg comes around next offseason. But at this point, I agree with the team not going to Lenny Krieg here, which it seems like he's not really involved. And I think it was pretty obvious, like watching him in camp and like preseason, that Krieg is just not really ready for the NFL yet. He's got a cannon leg, and I think he needs to work on the technical parts of kicking and all that stuff. And I know that like blows some people's minds that that's a thing that kickers need to do, but he needs NFL coaching. And, I think he's got the talent to get there, but I think throwing him in now, you risk sort of possibly like shattering his confidence. And as you can see, that's kind of the most important thing for kickers. So I agree with the plan to kind of keep him on the shelf and see if he can be your kicker of the future. But for right now, I think the best option for this team is to let Romo and Koo battle it out. But at the end of the day, it is what it is right now with Koo. If he misses another kick, he's cut. I think that's where he is right now with the Falcons. And it's not, I think some people might say like, oh, that's not fair or whatever. It's like he's lasted longer than most kickers would, other than Jake Moody. And Jake Moody was just cut. So, like, Jake Moody was not good at all his rookie year. The 49ers kept him around. They weren't exactly paying him a lot of money. I mean, they invested a third-round pick in him, which that's a Kyle Shanahan masterclass. But, at this point, there's not really any heavy incentive to move on from Koo, like financially. The Falcons can't get the money back from this year. They can get the money back next year, but I think at this point, let him battle it out. I would be surprised if it's not Romo kicking on Sunday, or I mean, not surprised, but I think Romo will ultimately win the job. But Koo very, very well might continue to kick on Sunday, but I think that's probably the end of the line there. So is what it is. But we talked about the Bucs game at length on our post-game show, which Adnan was able to join us for. And I talked about it also a bunch with Trayshawn on Tuesday Takes. But we haven't talked about it with you, Aaron. So is there anything in particular from last week's game that you wanted to say on here before we move on to week 2? Because I think there was a game that kind of felt misunderstood, in my opinion, that a lot of people were like, oh, the Bucs deserve to win that game. They're the better team. I don't think the Bucs were really the better team for most of the game. Now, they definitely finished in a way that the Falcons absolutely did not. But I think those were two relatively evenly matched teams. The Falcons definitely statistically were the better team. They dominated time of possession. The Falcons defense was much better than the Bucs defense. And, outside of the run game, the Falcons offense was effective in spurts. It just couldn't really string any drives together outside of a couple opportunities. But, where are you at sort of with your feelings on this team coming out of week 1?
Well, yeah, I look at these Bucs matchups over the last 2+ seasons now, and they're all kind of been games that have really kind of boiled down to, like, did you make one throw? The team that won the game was the team that made like one throw that was like the last throw. Like, obviously the great example of that is the Kadero Hodge touchdown on Thursday night last year. I remember, I want to say in 23, where the Falcons beat the Bucs in I think that week 7 game or whatever in Tampa, and like Richie Grant blew a coverage to I want to say Chris Godwin in the end zone, and Baker Mayfield didn't see a wide open Chris Godwin on what would have been the final play of that game, and it resulted in a sack or an incompletion or whatever, and the Falcons won. And it's just one of those things where, like, with the Bucs Falcons, it's just going to be one of those games where it doesn't matter, if you're up for 3 quarters or down for 3 quarters. It's probably going to boil down to who has the ball last in the final 2 minutes of the game, and if you make the play that you need to make in order to win the game. And unfortunately for the Falcons, they weren't able to do that. And we focus on maybe the last 5 minutes of the game for obvious reasons, because obviously that's the do or die situation. But there were a lot of opportunities for the Falcons earlier in the game that they just didn't take advantage of, whether you look at the red zone, whether you look at the dropped turnovers, whether you look at some of the back and forth, the field position battle with special teams and all that stuff. So I look at that game as a disappointment, it's not a surprise to me that the Falcons didn't come away with the W, because like a lot of these Bucs games have basically been a coin toss, and the Falcons have seemingly it's come up heads for the Falcons. What 4 out of the last 5 times or something like that. But they were probably due for a tails at this stage, and so that's kind of my main takeaway from last week's game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think they had lots of opportunities, and I was really quite happy with how the defense looked. And like, it was kind of, I guess I would say it was surprising that they looked good, but part of what frustrated me last year was I feel like they just super underperformed with the relatively like same talent that they did the year before. And this year I feel like is just kind of a correction. Like, this was the talent level that they had. They just really underperformed. Like, I think this is like talent level wise about the 20th ranked defense. Last year they were like the 28th defense. Last week they were maybe like the 18th defense. So like, I don't know that they're going to be like that or better on a weekly basis, but I think they're just going to be consistently average this year, as opposed to what we saw last year, which was just, they would have some games where they looked serviceable, and then they would just like the Panthers game at the end of the year is a perfect example, just completely implode and look god awful. So I think hopefully that's behind us, but I'm sure there'll be some stinkers mixed in, no doubt about that. But at this stage, I think I'm a lot more confident in the defense. But that kind of gets us into this week 2 talk here, where odds have improved for the Falcons, folks. According to FanDuel, Falcons are 3.5-point underdogs going into this Sunday night football matchup. They were 4.5 as of, I think, like a couple days ago, yesterday. So at this point, a little bit of improvement there, but Adnan, tough game. Some people seem to be really taking the Vikings lightly. Some people think they're still a 14-win team. I think they're somewhere in the middle there, and they're like a 10, 11-win team this year. But how are you feeling going into what looks like it could be a pretty critical Sunday night football matchup?
Look, I feel better about this week than I did about the Bucs game going into it. Like, I was very, very cautious going into that game, and honestly, I'm kind of happy that we didn't give score predictions last week, because it would have just given everyone a reason to call me a hater. Because I was gonna like pick the Bucs to win this one, but with the Vikings, it's it's going to be difficult playing in Minnesota. I think that team has a very, very legitimate home field advantage, especially playing on Sunday night, especially given the fact that this is their home opener. We know that Brian Flores is one of the top defensive coordinators in the league. We know that Kevin O'Connell is probably one of the maybe best three coaches in the league or so. And I think the Vikings will have a significant coaching advantage when it comes to this matchup on both sides of the field, both offensively and defensively. I think O'Connell is a better play caller, offensive coach than Ulbrich and Morris are on defense, and I think Flores is going to have an advantage in the matchup against Robinson, and that's what gives me pause, what scares me a little bit. But I feel like these injuries that we mentioned are a bit of an equalizer at this point, especially if guys like Cashman, Van Ginkel, and Ryan Kelly are all unable to play, and we don't know the status of Harrison Smith either. That's 4 starters right there that Minnesota could be without this weekend. And also, I'm not the biggest believer. I'm on record. I'm not a JJ McCarthy believer at all. I think he did great in that fourth quarter. Props to him. I tip my cap to him for that comeback and for playing the way he did to close out that game. But seeing that overall game against Chicago on Monday Night Football, I know it was a road divisional matchup, but even though Minnesota won that game, it sort of weirdly made me even more confident going into this week, just given the fact that they did not look at all like the team that we saw last year. Like that was the Minnesota Vikings of last year would have absolutely trounced this Bears team. Especially, given some of the injuries in the secondary that the Bears had. I think that McCarthy is a significant step back from what we saw from Sam Darnold last year. I think Darnold was a Pro Bowler. And honestly, I do think that the Falcons are going to pull it out this week, especially all especially if the wide receivers play. Now, if London and Mooney are both out, then it's sort of it gets very, very difficult. This prediction is just contingent on those guys playing, but I'm not really. I know it sounds like I'm taking them lightly, but I'm not really that scared of the Minnesota Vikings. I think it was sort of a fool's gold season last year, and I think they're much, much closer to a 500 team than the NFC juggernaut that we saw last year. And I think this game will sort of be that first step in them showcasing that this season.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could be the case. That was definitely a rougher week one than I think Vikings fans were expecting, certainly. Yeah, I mean, I part of it is like I respect the coaching staff, and I think that's why they overachieved to such an extent last year, is because they have a great offensive coach and a great defensive coach that just squeezed a lot more out of that roster than should have been possible. This is also a Vikings team that's not at full strength. Like we mentioned, the lengthy injury report. If all those guys don't play, this is a Vikings team that's very shorthanded at a number of positions, and they're down their number 2 receiver. They're missing a lot of pieces. So this is an opportunity for the Falcons against a non-full strength Vikings team that this could be a critical game for wild card seeding as well. So it's really important for Atlanta. And emotional late game for the Vikings, like we said at the top, them coming off Monday Night Football, the Falcons actually do have a rest advantage going into this game. That does matter. So I think this is a difficult game because I think Flores obviously showed last year that he had Zach Robinson's number, and they just kicked the crap out of the Falcons in the second half. But this isn't the same team, not the same quarterback, and I think it's an opportunity here for the Falcons to kind of reset the narrative and get the win against a team that I think everybody still thinks is really, really good. So if the Falcons could find a way to steal a win here, it could be significant. But Aaron, how are you feeling going into this Sunday Night Football matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it like I think the Vikings are correctly the favorite in this game, but I do think they're relatively 2 evenly matched teams. I think you guys pointed out like probably the biggest advantage that the Vikings have is their coaching, which is why they've consistently beaten the Falcons the last couple of times they've played them under Kevin O'Connell. It's just they seem to be able to get more out of their players than the Falcons have consistently been able to get out of their players, and that make those sort of margins have made the difference in some very close battles the last couple of years between these two teams. And you based off of that, you kind of expect a similar thing to potentially happen in primetime. But I think it's a very winnable game for the Falcons. I think the key is going to be whether or not this coaching staff, for the Falcons that is, can get their team to play better than what we saw on Sunday with some of the issues that we've already discussed with the run game and the special teams and all that stuff, and being able to stretch defenses vertically, which they didn't do last week, and all that stuff. And so if the Falcons can do that, then I think this is definitely a game that they can go out there and quote unquote surprise people by getting a win and getting that upset victory. I think for me, the key difference is just like, I'm just going to assume based off of Kevin O'Connell's history that the arrow is going to point up for JJ McCarthy based off of what we saw this past Monday, right? That you're probably not going to get as down a performance from JJ McCarthy as we saw in those first 3 quarters, where it was just basically their passing attack was just a non-factor, and then you had the pick 6, and then they just seemingly blacked out and turned on a switch and made the plays. And so it's one of those things that that gives you some pause for this upcoming game, where it's like if it boils down to a 1-possession game, JJ McCarthy's shown that he can win those games. But obviously, we've seen the Falcons and Michael Penix do similar things. The problem with Michael Penix and the Falcons is it always seems to boil down that Michael Penix puts them in the position to win a game, and then a kicker misses a kick, and then it all goes to crap and whatnot. So I think this is going to be pretty typical of a lot of games the Falcons have this year, where it's kind of going to be kind of who makes the plays in the last 5 minutes that wins the game, And really, until we get to Sunday evening, 11:30 p.m. Eastern or whenever that time is, you can say like, yeah, I feel reasonably confident that the Falcons can do that, but I also feel, it's just as likely that the Vikings can do that. And so kind of, again, flip a coin, and then that will kind of determine who winds up winning this game. So I feel good that I expect the Falcons to play better than they did this past Sunday. The question is, will they play significantly better where we're not sitting there sweating, with 4 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, which is just, I would love to live that life.
That would be nice.
I don't think we're in that timeline quite yet. So we'll see.
Yeah. I think we're a ways away from that being a reality, unfortunately. But I agree. I think there's a lot of things the Falcons need to do in this game to secure the dub, and I think they will play better. So that's what we're going to talk about now, folks. Real quick, couple super chats here. We got Solaire with the $2. What's up, Solaire? Thanks for joining us. Says, coup kicking in Vikings Stadium. Is it time for the reverse jinx? I mean, maybe Solaire. It could be a possibility. And then we got Ray Moon with the $2 saying, JJ McCarthy showed a lot of heart. We still have the better quarterback, though. I mean, through 4 games, yeah, I would still take Michael Penix. We'll have to see how JJ comes out. I would probably, I'm obviously going to be partial to Michael Penix no matter what, just because some of the plays Michael Penix made on Sunday, I don't know how you don't get fired up. Like, before, like, this is a diatribe, but it's like, I don't know how you watch the end of that game with Michael Penix, like, leaping through the air, like, doing literally everything he can to keep the Falcons alive and to get the first down, to get the touchdown, and be like, yeah, well, he missed some throws in the first half. What are you doing? Like, we haven't had a quarterback worth of shit in like 3 seasons, and we're out here talking about missing throws in the first half? Come on, people. Enjoy Michael Penix for like a second. Can you just respect the man? Put some respect on his name. I don't give a shit if he misses some throws if you're going to do that at the end of the game. All right? It's not like he had to do that because he sucked the rest of the game. It was because the defense shit the bed and Rukaroro pushed Baker Mayfield slightly out of bounds, and the refs got, a little offended by that, I guess. But, yeah, let's back off on the Michael Penix, critique a little bit, all right? As like the resident, nitpicker, we need to get over that shit. All right. Michael Penix has done enough. He is not the problem. He is not the problem here. But I do wonder, like, the big thing for this game is the run game. Like, the Vikings are very good against the run, but the Falcons have to get something going on the ground. Like, they were putrid rushing the football against the Bucs, and that they have to get better there. And some of that's probably going to be familiarity and cohesion with this offensive line. Falcons seemed terrified to run the ball behind Elijah Wilkinson, which, like, going into that game, I was also concerned about. But I think, like, Wilkinson is actually fine as a run blocker. So I think it's fine to run behind him. I don't know that, like, we should do it like we did with Killa McGarry, where it was like 70% outside zone with, like, most of that running behind Killa McGarry. But, like, you can run behind Wilkinson. You don't have to avoid him on that side of the offensive line. But, like, I don't know. To me, I think getting this run game going, and maybe not to a crazy extent, because you do need to throw against this Vikings defense, and you need to have a balanced attack, arguably, because of how much blitzing and other stuff they're going to do. But, yeah, Adnan, how important do you think it is for the Falcons to get this run game going against Minnesota?
Honestly, I think it's huge. And I feel like that's what Minnesota did last year to overwhelm so many teams. They would take away the run, and they would sort of let the pass rushers and let Brian Flores with his blitzes completely tee off on opposing quarterbacks, especially when they get them in those third and long situations, because teams weren't successful, winning on first and second down without a run game. And I feel like if the Falcons are not able to get that run game going, it could be a long night. Like, I think Michael Penix is very, very good against the blitz in general, but yeah, it could be a long night if he's facing it consistently in 3rd and 7, in 3rd and 8 situations. And then at that point, the Vikings can disguise some blitzes and they can throw you some curveballs, and you're just playing completely into their hands. The Falcons, Algier and Bijan Robinson had 22 carries for 48 rushing yards on Sunday. that's not going to get it done at all. Like, that was one of the worst rushing performances I've seen from the Falcons in a bit of time, for sure. And for this game, I think you really sort of need those those 4 yards on first down, and you really want to be ahead of the chains a little bit to give Michael Penix the best possible opportunity. Like, this needs to be 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s, as opposed to like 3rd and 7. So I think everything is going to really sort of have to start with the run game. You don't have to completely kill them. You don't have to gash them in the run game, but it has to be serviceable enough to where you play completely into Brian Flores' hands.
Yeah, I think the short yardage in particular is going to be a big deal here. And I know, like, one of the big criticisms that I've seen fans talking about that I don't necessarily share, but I'm curious where you are on this, Aaron, is the personnel packages and the formations the Falcons are using. Pistol seems to be at public enemy number 1. Do you have a strong opinion on pistol, or do you think that's not really the problem here?
I think it's probably the most overblown thing. I'm going to throw some shade, but like the only people that care about seemingly pistol versus under center stuff are bad backup quarterbacks is basically what I've experienced when it comes to like Twitter and, Kurt Banker, Dan Orlovsky, keep doing you guys, but like, it doesn't matter. Like, if a guy blows a block, it doesn't matter where the quarterback is lined up or the running back is lined up. Like, it's not like defensive tackles like, wait, Michael Penix is 3 yards behind the center instead of under center. Oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get off a block. I don't know how to read my keys. Like, it's so dumb and overblown. I think there are issues with the pistol versus shotgun versus under center, right? I think it only really matters maybe when you want to talk about maybe the Falcons play action passing game, which was not very effective outside of that 50-yard touchdown to Bijan, which was basically just a check down. And then Bijan doing incredible Bijan things. And so, like, if you want to have the conversation about pistol, shotgun, under center, I think that applies to the play action stuff, maybe, potentially, possibly, right? But in terms of the run game, it's like, no, it doesn't matter, man. Like, the Falcons got their butts kicked in the trenches. That's why they couldn't run the football. It has nothing to do with, to me, the formation. Now, again, we can have a conversation about Zach Robinson's play calling and is it too predictable, and sort of when they line up in certain looks, do defenses know what's coming or things like that? Sure. I think we can have a conversation of that. I don't think that's really involving the pistol shotgun stuff. To me, that was more, the thing that stood out to me was basically when Algier was in the game, they ran outside zone. And when Bijan was in the game, they ran up the middle. And so that to me is the issue, not where the alignment of the running back is or the quarterback is. So for me, like, all that talk it's talk. It gets the people going. It's provocative, but like, I don't think it really means anything, at least to the degree. Now, we could very easily have a game where the Falcons decide to switch it up and go under center, and then they look good, and then we're like, oh, clearly that was the thing that they needed to do to unlock it. But I don't really agree with that. I just think it's a lot of things that people like to talk about just to get the people going.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen plenty of teams have a lot of success. The pistol, the Ravens are one team that runs very heavy pistol, and they obviously have a lot of success out of that formation. And the Falcons out of pistol were actually quite balanced. I think it was 17 runs to 15 passes. So the pistol was not the issue with the play calling balance, although there were play calling issues not related to the formation. If you want to get on the balance thing, talk about shotgun plays, because the Falcons passed out of shotgun at an extreme rate once again. That, to me, is a bigger issue than whether they use pistol or not. But, like, if you're going to use two formations mainly, and like shotgun and pistol, you have to be balanced out of both of them. You can't just throw out shotgun and then be balanced out of pistol. Like, you have to be somewhat balanced out of shotgun too. There's plenty of good shotgun runs. But yeah, I think under center should be a part of the offense. There are situations where it makes a lot of sense to start closer to the line of scrimmage to threaten the quarterback sneak or other things like that, right? I mean, there are situations where that's a good idea, but it's not really, like, pistol itself isn't problematic. Like, you can be very effective in pistol. We've seen plenty of NFL offenses use pistol extensively to great success. it's more to me the design of the run plays and the lack of variety in that design. Not that they're coming at a pistol, that we're just following Charlie Warner every time he goes in motion. Like, that's a much bigger issue than the fact that it's out of pistol, because that, like, you can run like 50 different plays out of pistol. There's not a lack of variety there. The formation doesn't limit you in that way. But if you're only going to call like the same 2 or 3 variations of a run out of pistol where you're just following the tight end every time, that's more problematic, and that's something that they're going to have to diversify. And maybe that is a symptom of them having to change up the offensive line a bunch, with Elijah Wilkinson, him having to learn a bunch more run plays. Maybe they wanted to keep it simple to help with that transition. Hopefully, if that was the case, that's going to be phased out. They can go a little bit less vanilla going forward, but they've got to find ways to diversify that and make it less predictable, because that was the biggest issue with the run game last year. Now, I will say they did run inside a lot more, but like, this was not like Vita Vea being healthy and running inside against Vita Vea. That probably wouldn't have been the matchup that I wanted to press the inside run button like 50 times. Not that they did actually do that, but they ran inside a lot in this game. And I don't think it was necessarily advantageous to do that in this particular matchup. But I do like that there was more inside running. Hopefully that will be the case going forward against some teams that maybe don't have like the best nose tackle in football. But we got $2 from Kyle Markison. Thank you. Saying, here's the deal, Bates or Watts interception incoming. Yes, we're going to talk about the defense and their role in this game here in just a second, but on anything you wanted to weigh in on with regards to the offense, the run game, any of that stuff?
My thing, and I'm with you guys, I think the whole pistol thing is overblown. Maybe it could just be that Michael Penix is more comfortable playing out of the pistol than he is, playing under center. And they're they did talk about how they were going to tailor the offense more so to Michael Penix this year. I feel like seeing so much of the pistol now isn't as egregious as it was last year when we saw Kirk Cousins line up in it a lot in week 1 and in the start of week 2, because I feel like Kirk Cousins is more of that under center quarterback, but it could just be that the team is tailoring the offense to Michael Penix, which is what we all were hoping they were going to do coming into the season either way.
Yeah. So we'll see how that develops. I'm sure you guys all remember, like last year, this team rolled out an extreme pistol offense in week 1, and they never went back to it all year. They still used the pistol, but like it was nowhere near what they looked like in week 1. The week 1 was kind of an aberration from an offense perspective. There's a chance, based on Zach Robinson's comments, that they're maybe going to do something like that again. We'll see. But they got to do better. They got to work in some different looks. They got to diversify the run game approach. They just got to find a way to make it work with the guys they have, because, we're not getting Caleb McGarry back. Maybe Storm Norton's an upgrade over Wilkinson, but in the meantime, you got to find a way to make it work, and you got to find a way to get something on the ground, particularly in short yardage, because that was the biggest issue, is this team could do nothing on the ground in short yardage, and that really hurt them. Like, their options were very limited. They were trying to go to screens and things like that, and they just weren't executing very well. And that's really the issue here, was execution. Like, if they had executed at a high level, we probably wouldn't be having these conversations, because it would have still been effective. Maybe not as effective as it could have been if it was called better, but like, they were missing, like, Charlie Warner was lead blocking on some of those runs, and he was missing the blocks. So, like, that's not going to help either, right? So, you gotta.
It's crazy how much more nitpicking happens when it comes to everything when you lose versus win.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I'm just thinking, like, imagine if Kadirul Hodge gets his head around a split second sooner, catches that pass from Michael Penix. It's like right there. Like, we're talking about, like the offense was just fine in week 1, and everything is as it should be, and this team is going to the Super Bowl. And instead, it's like, that one moment, that one like split second difference, and now the world is falling apart, and everything is to blame. Every single aspect, every single last facet of the game of football, we just do incorrectly.
Yep, that's right. And this team, it goes from like, oh hell yeah, to like, oh no, we suck again, just like that on a dime. So, That's unfortunate. But I will say the defense did fill me with hope. And Divine Diablo, real standout. I think he was a big wild card, and so far looks like that card's coming up aces. I think we saw some good contributions from the rookies. Jalen Walker's going to take a little while, guys. Be patient there. But Pierce created pressure, didn't get the sacks, but the pressure was nice to see. And like Xavier Watts, like, you know, I've saved all my draft take mojo for Xavier Watts, and this is the year it's going to hit. All this day 2 slam on Xavier Watts. He was everything I hoped for, except I would have liked him to catch a pick. But other than that, pretty much everything I'd hoped for. So that's going to be a major player this week. And you know, McCarthy threw a pick 6 against the Bears. And you know, he's a young quarterback that might be making some mistakes. Like the Bucs receivers outside of Justin Jefferson were not creating great separation against a pretty undermanned Bears secondary. So this could be a situation where the Falcons could take advantage with what should be a superior secondary. I'm guessing the Falcons are just going to double up Justin Jefferson and take him away as much as they possibly can and force Naylor and these other guys to beat them. Aaron, how are you feeling right now about how the Falcons defense looks going into this game?
Yeah, you know, I think the defense did some impressive things on Monday. I'm not as over the moon with it just because, like, I've been trained with the Falcons that, you know, never trust the defense. But to me, I'm very curious to see how it plays out over the next couple of weeks because, you know, every season we talk about this where, like, typically in the first month of the season, defenses typically are a little bit ahead of the offenses, right? The offense is kind of working out their kinks. And so part of me wonders, because you go back to even last year, like the defense wasn't great in that first month, but relative to what we saw later in the season, it was a much better brand of football than what we got later in the season. So you did, you know, until the very end of the season, not counting the Panthers game and the Vikings game, you saw arguably the best version of the Falcons in those first 4 games of the season last year. And part of me is kind of in wait and see mode, see how they look against Washington, see how they look against Buffalo, San Francisco, you know, quote unquote, real offenses with real quarterbacks. No offense to the Bucs and Baker Mayfield. But you know, that's a divisional opponent. That's why I'm not throwing shade at the Bucs. It's just a divisional opponent. You always play those teams tight. And so, like, I'm very curious what the defense does over that span, and that's why I'm kind of like not as enthusiastically over the moon about the week 1 performance. That objectively, if any other Falcon defense had done what this defense had done in week 1, whether it was stopping the run, rushing the quarterback, you know, breaking up passes on the back end, and all that stuff, you know, the Bucs didn't get into the red zone until like late in, I think, the fourth quarter, if I'm not mistaken. That was like their 1 red zone trip. If any other Falcons defense over the last like 15 years had done that, I'd be like, this is the greatest defense I've ever seen. But because of, you know, 15 years of watching the Falcons, I'm like, let's wait. I just want to see what happens against Jaden Daniels before I get too hyped up on this defense. But I do think going into this game, this is an opportunity with all the injuries that we've talked about, with no Jordan Addison. You know, this defense should be able to match up reasonably well against this Vikings offense. To me, the biggest challenge is just going to be Justin Jefferson, who had a quiet Monday night, which is worrisome to me because I'm just like, is Justin Jefferson going to have 2 bad games in a row? Probably not. But then that puts the Falcons in a position where it's like, what do you do to deal with Justin Jefferson? Because you know that's where the ball is going to go most of the time when J.J. McCarthy's dropping back to pass. And so I imagine you're going to do what we thought they probably should have done last year. Certainly hindsight tells us they should have done last year, which is have A.J. Terrell shadow him for the entire game and try to give him as much safety help as possible. Hopefully Jesse Bates will cheat to Justin Jefferson's side as opposed to cheating to, well, he did cheat to Mike Evans' side. And unfortunately, Mike Hughes was like, hey, bro, I thought you had me on that last touchdown. My bad, Mike. I was Mike Evans. I had to. So that's going to be the challenge where, you know, if you put all your, you know, your apples in the basket of trying to keep Justin Jefferson contained, that gives opportunities for Adam Thielen. That gives opportunities for Jalen Naylor. And, you know, no offense to those guys. I don't think any of those guys are as good as Emeka Egbuka, but they will have opportunities that if they can just make a couple of plays over the course of the game, as Ibuka was able to do, that could be a problem for the Falcons defense. So I'll be curious to see if Mike Hughes and Billy Bowman and some of these other guys in the secondary are going to be a little bit more up to the challenge than they were in week 1.
Yeah. I think that's going to be, I think the Thielen matchup with Bowman, where like Thielen we know is not peak Thielen anymore, but him being the savvy veteran that he is going up against the rookie and Bowman, who we know is pretty aggressive, might not be a great matchup, but we'll have to see, because I think Hughes will be fine against Naylor. I think Naylor is not really a wide receiver 2 caliber player. Like, let's just be honest.
Last words, Kevin.
Yeah, I know. I've doomed us now. I have totally doomed us. Jalen Naylor 3 for 110 on a touchdown. Yeah. Only gonna be 3 catches, but they're gonna suck. Yeah. Hopefully we won't have to worry about that. But yeah, Thielen is concerning. Though I think Bowman did a pretty good job, but he's a rookie, in his second start as a slot corner. So it might be a little dicey there. But on anything you want to touch on with the defense in this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I feel a lot better about the defense knowing that Jordan Addison is out and suspended these first 3 games, just because, you guys alluded to it. Outside of Justin Jefferson, it's Naylor, Adam Thielen, Ty Felton, Miles Price. That's their depth chart. None of those names really strike fear into the heart. And I would absolutely double team Jefferson as much as humanly possible in this game. And it's one of those where if Jalen Naylor beats you, then you just sort of tip your cap and you just say it is what it is, versus you have to do everything possible to shut down Jefferson. I think Jefferson is one of the 2 best receivers in football, right up there with Jamar Chase. And I think it's them 2, and then sort of a gap before we get to, the 3rd best wide receiver in the league. He's an absolute game changer. And I do think that the Vikings are going to deploy Aaron Jones a little more, maybe even out wide to help cover for Addison out. I know Jones had 3 catches. He had a touchdown. He had over 40 yards. So they're definitely doing something with Jones and Jordan Mason over there. We saw it on Monday night. They damn near split the snaps down the middle. And they have something working with those running backs, and those guys seem to complement each other very, very well. But I would be a lot more worried if Addison was out there too, because then it's like, okay, are you really going to trust Mike Hughes on an island against Jordan Addison? Addison did burn you very heavily last year in that matchup. He had 2 touchdowns as well, but I definitely feel better about this defense than I did about Jimmy Lake's defense in this same matchup last year, because that was the Vikings just completely ran roughshod on this defense last season.
Yeah, that was an ugly scheme that they deployed against the Vikings last year. So hopefully they're not going to try that again. But stopping the run will be important here too, for this Falcons defense, trying to limit this. And the Vikings are missing guys on the interior. That's going to make it a lot harder for them too. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I do think the Falcons defense should be better in this one than the last 2 times. Last time these 2 teams played each other, and we'll see how they handle it. But I think I like the Falcons secondary in this matchup. Without Addison, they don't really have that legit number 2 threat. So I think the Falcons need to double up Justin Jefferson. I think they can afford to do that, and then try to make plays elsewhere. If JJ is going to lean on Jefferson, try to get in front of those passes, and then just trust your guys on the rest of the field to make plays. And if we can get some turnovers in this one, I think that will be the difference. That would have been the difference against the Bucs too. You pick off one of those passes that you should have got, totally changes that game. And the Falcons were creating turnover opportunities constantly, and I don't think McCarthy's going to handle the pressure as well as Baker Mayfield did, who we know he's just a pro at getting out of those situations. Now, Baker Mayfield tried really hard to throw picks, and the Falcons just didn't grab him. But, we'll see how that develops. But I think McCarthy's going to be easier to sack. Baker Mayfield's strangely wily back there in terms of avoiding sacks. And yeah, just got to find a way to take advantage of some mistakes by a young quarterback and be better on offense. Just be better, be a little more consistent. I think that'll be good enough. But we saw Penix just handle the blitz really well. So if the Vikings are planning to blitz him, I'm not sure that's going to go super well for them. I think Penix has shown he's pretty fearless against the blitz so far, has really good stats against it. Now it's, going to limit how much deep passing they can do. But again, it's like, I especially if Mooney's back, they may just try to throw some stuff up if they see an all-out blitz coming and see how it goes. So interested to see how that plays out. But yeah, guys, thanks so much for joining us here on Falcoholic Live, episode 345. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Really appreciate that. Leave us that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks again to FanDuel for presenting the show tonight. Before we sign off, I want to thank, of course, our guest, Aaron Freeman at Locked On Falcons, obviously host of Locked On Falcons, doing the daily podcast over there. Aaron, anything else you want to plug? Oh, you might be muted.
Yes. Unmute. No, that's it.
I'm just unmuting to say I have nothing else to say. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, Aaron. No, definitely check out Locked On Falcons, guys. If 3 to 4 shows here isn't enough, Aaron's got lots more shows for you. So if you're truly a fiend for Falcons content, there's no one better than Aaron for that. Sometimes I need it too. I just need, because I don't like to listen to myself talk, so I need some other perspectives.
I love listening to myself talk. So.
Oh, I love it. I listen sometimes. Sometimes if I feel like did a real banger show, maybe. But yeah, we got Adnan Ikic as well. Adnan's at Say Which Way. Adnan, anything else you're working on right now to let people know about?
Yeah, fantasy stud and dud went on Monday. Yesterday, or today's Wednesday. Yeah, okay. Yeah, yesterday morning, an offensive line continuity article got published that I wrote this past week, and we'll have series history as well as what if Falcons win or lose this week. I feel like Dave needs to start compensating me more. I'm just now realizing as I'm talking through it that I've been writing a lot the past week or so. But all of that is going to be on the Falcoholic, thefalcoholic.com, your one-stop shop. And to answer Corey Carter's question, yes, Jefferson and Chase were on the same team. Probably the greatest college football team of all time, that 2019 LSU squad. But yeah, what a team that was with Joe Burrow. But hopefully he doesn't completely destroy the Falcons the way that he destroyed college defenses. But yeah, check out thefalcoholic.com. Yeah,
check it out, guys, for sure. And yeah, I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. You can see my stuff on the Falcoholic as well. You can also, of course, check it out here on YouTube or on Spotify. We're under Dirty Birds and Brews on the podcast platforms. Leave us a 5-star review there if you haven't done so already. Help us out. And yeah, guys, we will be back with a game preview coming for you guys sometime on Friday to get you ready for Sunday Night Football, where, of course, we'll be going live as late as they make us stay after that Sunday Night Football game to break down what's hopefully a Week 2 victory and the Falcons getting back to 500 before heading to Carolina in Week 3 for a critical division game against a team that the Falcons probably should beat handily, but given what happened with the Panthers last year, probably don't want to make too many early proclamations about that. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with us tonight. We will see you next time on the Falcoholic Live and Dirty Birds and Brews. Have a great night, folks.